Thank you so much, Ambassador Osius. And thank you, Minister, Ambassador Blake, David, this entire group. I'm just bursting out of my skin with excitement to see people in person. And I've just removed my mask, so it feels, I feel extra naked. But this is really terrific, and I just want to give a shout out to USINDO for many, many years of fostering this important dialogue between the private sector, civil society, and governments, both in the US and Indonesia. And you can see that the fruits of your labor are coming to blossom and ripen, and we're very eager to work off of the tremendous foundation that you've built. So thank you, David and USINDO, for including me and for including DFC. Before I start, I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Erin Murphy, who's sitting at table 2, and who has done, many of you know Erin in this room. She's done tremendous work at DFC, coordinating our efforts in Southeast Asia generally, but in Indonesia specifically. We would be lost without her. Another colleague I'd like to recognize, who's not here because he's based in Jakarta, and many of you know him as well, is Doug Midland. And Erin and Doug together are just a tremendous team for us at the tip of the spear in terms of what we're doing in Indonesia and ASEAN, and thank you, Erin. So please keep eating. I promise I will be brief, but I do want to talk a little bit about what we're doing on climate. And I just want to share that one of the sort of the personal privileges and joys of this job that I've had has been getting to learn and getting to meet so many Indonesian leaders in the short time that I've been with DFC, and to see how front and center the Indonesian relationship is in the US foreign policy, and specifically in our climate diplomacy. I joined the Biden administration in May, and one of the very first meetings that I had was a climate working group that met between the hours of midnight and 1 in the morning. And I learned quickly that this was a schedule that many US diplomats, and when it was flipped to the morning schedule, many Indonesian diplomats are used to maintaining because of the dedication to that relationship and to this issue. And those working groups have continued diligently. They've been a core part of what we've been preparing in the run-up to COP26, which is meeting in Glasgow in just a couple of weeks. And it's been an excellent working relationship, and I want to say congratulations to Indonesia specifically for the work that you've done on the global methane pledge. Indonesia was the first developing economy out of the G20 to join a really momentous agreement that just this weekend was able to announce at the Major Economies Forum that another 24 nations have joined. And this partnership, which has pledged together to reduce methane emissions 30% by the year 2030, can now boast having 9 of the top 20 emitters of methane supporting the pledge, which represents 60% of global GDP. And this includes nations such as Pakistan, Argentina, Mexico, Nigeria, and almost a dozen in sub-Saharan Africa. And without Indonesia's leadership, we wouldn't be there. So thank you very much. It's a tremendous, tremendous achievement. So this type of partnership and leadership on climate is also critical for the work that we do in economic development. And we need to do much more. DFC presently has about $33 billion of assets deployed across a global portfolio. For those of you who may not be familiar, DFC is America's development bank. We work to mobilize private investment in emerging economies. The BUILD Act, which was just enacted a couple of years ago, authorized DFC to invest up to $60 billion of capital across a variety of financial tools. We use debt financing and political risk insurance, equity investments in companies and in funds, to create catalytic investments from the private sector into development finance. We now also have the authority to make technical assistance grants where pre-financing support is critical to our ability to later do follow-on investing in debt and equity. And we're using each of these financial products to realize a new vision for climate finance, which will require substantial and sustained investment. According to the IFC, the climate finance gap in all emerging markets stands at around $1.5 to $2 trillion annually. And according to IRENA, for Southeast Asia and the Pacific alone, $75 billion annually through 2050 is needed in clean energy investments in the power sector, and particularly in transmission infrastructure, if we're going to achieve a 1.5 degree warming target. And yet we know that that investment, the investment that we are currently making, is off by at least one order of magnitude, and maybe two. The US is working hard to mobilize more public financing. And as we approach COP26, the US has finally been able to deliver on our share of the $100 billion promise that was made in Copenhagen in 2009. But again, the global community remains one, maybe two orders of magnitude off the mark. So how can we get to the trillions needed in total financing? The answer, in our view, is in the private sector and in everybody in this room, and the critical role that civil society has to play in mobilizing private sector finance and the capital markets towards climate finance. Because although climate change is perhaps the crisis of this generation, it also represents a rare opportunity to create economic growth and raise standards of living and create healthier communities. Our Energy Secretary Granholm loves to say that this is a $23 trillion market, and there are $23 trillion worth of economic development and goods and jobs out there, and the race is on to get there. So DFC is working off of a strong foundation with more than $5 billion of investments in renewable energy and a growing portfolio of food security and climate-smart agriculture projects. And we've made several new commitments just in the last few months. First, DFC will expand its support for climate-linked projects so they account for at least 33% of all new investments beginning in the fiscal year 23. Second, we've committed to a net zero portfolio by the year 2040. And third, we announced a first of its kind climate action facility, which will allocate at least $50 million in technical assistance grants for feasibility studies and similar projects to help pre-finance projects that are in need of early finance support. We've also initiated calls for projects from the private sector in distributed renewable energy and in funds for climate. That leads me to three things that I hope you will remember from this brief but seemingly elongating set of remarks. Number one, we can be a partner for innovation in climate finance. We can do classic finance along the lines of what we did in Indonesia with big tree farms, where we provided loans for the design, construction, commissioning, and supply chain development for coconut sugar and coconut byproduct processing facilities in Java and Sulawesi. But we can also work on the kinds of debt for nature swaps that we're doing in the Caribbean and in Latin America to protect critical ecosystems and to develop markets for carbon. And it's why we're looking at new tools like parametric insurance, which can help communities to better cope with the impacts of climate change by paying out premiums based on impacts rather than on claims. Second, DFC is going to be a major partner in adaptation and resilience. We're doing this in a variety of ways, ranging from more storm-resilient infrastructure investments to helping small farmers access insurance to help protect them from drought or flood, two areas that are critical for Indonesia. And finally, we're going to be focused on reducing the carbon intensity of all economies in which we work, whether that's through mitigation projects like the type of geothermal project that we're now exploring with PTSMI, or through standard infrastructure projects, which will apply a carbon lens across the board. That's why we were so excited about a recent financing we did to support construction of Indonesia's first utility-scale wind power plant, consisting of 30 wind turbines and a 3-kilometer transmission line that connects to the grid. The plant adds 75 megawatts of renewable power to the grid, and it also helps to offset seasonal disparities in the power generation capacity in Sulawesi, where hydropower generation can sometimes slow in the dry season. Ultimately, we believe that investments like these can form the backbone of a new development finance, one that recognizes that economic mobility, opportunities for good work, and better outcomes in public health are the hallmarks of a durable economic growth, and they require consideration of resilience for the future. I mentioned that we have Doug in Jakarta, and I mentioned that we have Aaron and myself in DC, and I really hope that all three of us can hear from this community and this group to drive forward specific transactions that you have in your pipelines, that you have on your radar. We're eager to work together with the private sector, with civil society, and we really look forward to working together to mobilize more resources from the public sector and from the private sector to achieve our climate goals together. And thank you again to David and to the minister and to USINDO.